Close your eyes. Right now, just for 5 seconds. Close them. Notice how fast it happened, that shift. The sounds in the room became louder. Your breathing slowed by a fraction. Something in your chest, just slightly, released. That was your nervous system responding to the removal of visual input. 5 seconds. That's all it took. Now imagine you've been denying your brain that moment every single night for years. Not dramatically, not violently, just quietly, a screen glowing in the corner. Voices murmuring through dialogue you're not fully hearing. Flashing light pulsing against your closed eyelids while you drift in and out of something that feels like sleep. Most people don't think of this as a problem. It feels harmless, comforting even, like background noise, like company. But here's what no one tells you. Your brain doesn't know it's background noise. Your brain doesn't know you're trying to sleep. And what it does in response to that screen every single night, silently, while you believe you're resting, is one of the most quietly destructive processes in modern neuroscience. Here's the first thing you need to understand. Your brain has a biological clock. Scientists call it the circadian rhythm, but that name makes it sound gentle, like a lullaby. It isn't gentle. It is a 24-hour molecular machinery embedded in nearly every cell of your body, in your liver, your heart, your immune system. Your neurons all synchronized to one master clock, housed in a tiny region of your hypothalamus called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, the SCN. About 20,000 neurons, smaller than a grain of rice. And for 300,000 years of human evolution, this clock had one primary signal to track: light, sunrise, sunset, the slow dimming of the world. Light enters your retina, travels to the SCN, and the SCN broadcasts a message to the entire body. It's day, it's night, stay alert, begin shutdown. The system is ancient. It is precise, it is non-negotiable, and your television is breaking it not metaphorically, but at the cellular level. Here's where it gets interesting. The retina contains a special class of cells, not the rods and cones you learned about in school, but intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, or iPRGCs. These cells do not see images. They do not process color or shape or motion in the way your visual cortex understands it. They do one thing only. They measure light intensity and broadcast it directly to your biological clock. They are hardwired to your SCN with almost no intermediary, which means that when your TV is on, even when your eyes are closed, even when you're halfway asleep, these cells are still active, still firing, still sending a single unambiguous signal to your hypothalamus. It is daytime. Do not begin nighttime protocols. And your brain, because it is a machine built for survival and not for Netflix, listens. Let's follow what happens next. Every evening, as natural light fades, your SCN sends a signal to a small endocrine gland buried deep in the center of your skull, the pineal gland. René Descartes once called it the seat of the soul. He was wrong about that. But he wasn't entirely wrong that it's extraordinary. The pineal gland produces melatonin, a hormone whose job is not simply to make you sleepy. That is an oversimplification that has misled millions of people. Melatonin is a timing signal, a broadcast, a chemical timestamp that tells every organ in your body, darkness has arrived, begin biological nighttime, and it does this with extraordinary precision. In a natural sleep environment, melatonin begins rising around 9 p.m. By midnight, it peaks. Your core body temperature begins to fall. Your heart rate slows. Blood pressure drops. Your prefrontal cortex, the seat of executive function, decision-making, self-control goes offline by degrees. And your brain begins consolidating memory, clearing metabolic waste, and performing repairs that are biologically impossible during waking hours. This is not sleep as passive rest. This is sleep as the most active maintenance operation your body runs. But that's not the strange part. Television light, specifically the blue wavelength component embedded in LED screens, suppresses melatonin production with a precision that is almost surgical. A 2012 Harvard study measured the effect. Just 2 hours of blue light exposure before bed suppressed melatonin by up to 22%. More recent research, tracking individuals who fall asleep with screens on throughout the night, found suppression occurring in pulses each time the screen brightness changed, each time a scene shifted. The pineal gland received a new interruption signal. You are not sleeping through this. Your endocrine system is not sleeping through this. And the downstream consequences of that melatonin disruption touch systems most people never connect to a television set. Here's what almost no one is talking about. There is a system in your brain that was only discovered in 2012, not 1912, 2012. In the history of neuroscience, this is extraordinarily recent. It was hidden because no one had a way to see it, not in a living brain, not during sleep. It is called the glymphatic system. And when scientists finally observed it, they described what they saw as something close to a discovery about consciousness itself. Here's what happens while you sleep in those deep, uninterrupted, dark environment phases of unconscious rest. The glial cells surrounding your neurons physically shrink, not by much, by approximately 60% of their volume. And as they shrink, they create space channels, pathways through which cerebrospinal fluid begins to flow through your brain tissue in high-pressure pulses. This fluid is not passive. It is, functionally, your brain's waste management system. It floods the spaces between neurons and washes out metabolic byproducts, including, most critically, amyloid beta plaques and tau proteins. The same proteins that accumulate in the brains of Alzheimer's patients. The same proteins your neurons produce as natural byproducts of conscious thought throughout the day. The glymphatic system runs at full capacity for one reason, and one reason only: deep, uninterrupted sleep. Stage 3. Slow-wave sleep. The phase that takes time to reach, requires your core temperature to have dropped, requires melatonin to be circulating, requires complete sensory withdrawal to sustain. And the real question is, what disrupts it? Any interruption. Any. A sound that pulls you from deep sleep to light sleep. A flash of light that activates your IPRGCs. A shift in the audio track of the show playing in the background. Each disruption collapses the glymphatic flow, resets it, forces the brain to rebuild toward deep sleep from the beginning. For most people who sleep with the TV on, stage 3 sleep becomes rare, not impossible, but fragmented, brief, and chronically incomplete, night after night after night, and the amyloid beta accumulates. To understand what's being disrupted, you need to understand what sleep is actually for, and I mean mechanistically, not rest, not recovery, the actual biological operations. Your brain cycles through sleep architecture in roughly 90-minute blocks. Each block contains a progression, from light sleep, stage 1, and stage 2, through deep, slow-wave sleep, stage 3, and finally into REM sleep, rapid eye movement. Each stage does something irreplaceable. In stage 2, your brain produces bursts of synchronized neural activity called sleep spindles, 12 to 15 Hz oscillations that last about half a second, repeating 1,000 to 2,000 times per night in a healthy sleeper. Sleep spindles are now understood to be the mechanism by which your brain transfers information from short-term storage in the hippocampus to long-term storage in the cortex. Every memory you need to keep a skill, a name, an event, a piece of learning goes through this spindle process. Research from the University of California, Berkeley, has shown that a single night of sleep deprivation reduces the brain's capacity to form new memories the following day by up to 40%. Not because the hippocampus is tired, but because it hasn't offloaded the previous day's cache. It's full, and it has nowhere to put what you're trying to give it. Now here's where the television compounds the damage. The audio environment of a sleeping room is not neutral. Your brain, even in sleep, continues monitoring sound through the auditory cortex and the thalamus, a process called thalamic gating. The thalamus acts as a filter, deciding which sounds are safe to ignore and which require attention. Television dialogue is specifically problematic. Human voices trigger different neural processing than white noise or rain sounds. When your sleeping brain detects speech, even muffled, even incomprehensible, it cannot fully engage thalamic suppression. The auditory cortex remains slightly aroused. The amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, stays partially online, monitoring for emotional cues in the vocal patterns. It never fully lets go. Sleep spindles are disrupted, memory consolidation is impaired, and you wake up having technically slept 8 hours, but with a brain that processed maybe 5. Now here is where the science becomes something most people are not prepared for. The damage is not just nightly, the damage is cumulative. And it compounds in a way that follows a biological escalation most researchers did not anticipate. Chronic fragmented sleep does not simply make you tired, it restructures your brain. Neuroplasticity, the brain's capacity to reorganize itself, grow new connections, prune old ones, is almost entirely a sleep-dependent process. The molecules that govern neuroplasticity, including brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, are produced primarily during slow-wave sleep. BDNF is sometimes called fertilizer for the brain. It is responsible for the growth of new neurons in the hippocampus, the structure at the center of learning, memory, and spatial navigation. When slow-wave sleep is chronically disrupted, BDNF production falls, and the hippocampus, over time, begins to shrink. This is not a metaphor. This has been measured in MRI studies. Individuals with chronic sleep disorders, including environmentally induced sleep fragmentation, show measurably reduced hippocampal volume compared to healthy sleepers. The effect becomes statistically significant in as few as 5 to 7 years of consistent sleep disruption. 5 to 7 years. That's not decades. That's not a slow, invisible process. That's the time many people have been sleeping with their television on, believing they were fine, believing it was harmless. And this changes everything, because the hippocampus isn't just for memory. The hippocampus regulates the stress response. It sends inhibitory signals to the amygdala and the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis that governs cortisol release. A smaller hippocampus means less regulatory power, less cortisol suppression, which means elevated baseline stress hormones, which means chronic low-grade inflammation, which means accelerated cellular aging. One small glow in the corner of your bedroom is now, through an unbroken chain of mechanisms, influencing your rate of biological aging. Mechanism 3. The autonomic nervous system and the hidden arousal state. Let's go deeper into what the brain is doing during television sleep, because there is a mechanism here that most sleep researchers now consider the most important piece of the puzzle. It involves your autonomic nervous system, the part of your biology that you cannot consciously control. The autonomic nervous system has two primary modes: the sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight, activation, alertness, and the parasympathetic, rest and digest, recovery, cellular repair. These two systems are mutually suppressive. When one is dominant, the other steps back. Genuine deep sleep is among the most powerful activators of parasympathetic dominance that your body can achieve. During slow-wave sleep, your heart rate variability, a measure of autonomic balance, reaches its highest point. Your immune system upregulates. Cytokines flood the bloodstream. Cellular repair mechanisms that are suppressed by cortisol finally activate. But here's what the television does. Even when you believe you are deeply asleep, even when your eyes are closed, your breathing is slow. Your body appears to a casual observer to be at complete rest. If audio-visual stimulation is present in the environment, your autonomic nervous system maintains a measurable sympathetic baseline. Researchers at Johns Hopkins measured this using polysomnography combined with heart rate variability tracking. Subjects sleeping in TV-on environments showed significantly elevated sympathetic tone compared to subjects in silent, dark rooms, even during what appeared to be equivalent sleep stages on the EEG. The body was in sleep, the nervous system was not. And this distinction between the appearance of sleep and the physiology of sleep is everything. Because immune function, cellular repair, hormone secretion, glymphatic clearance, BDNF production, memory consolidation, none of these processes care what your EEG shows. They activate in response to autonomic state, to neurochemical environment, to the actual physiological conditions of rest. And those conditions are not being met. The next mechanism is even more surprising. Here is where this stops being a story about bad sleep and becomes something much larger. Inside nearly every cell in your body, there is a countdown clock. It is physical, it is measurable, and it is one of the most studied mechanisms in the science of human aging. It is called the telomere. Telomeres are the protective caps on the ends of your chromosome sequences of non-coding DNA that shorten slightly every time a cell divides. When they shorten past a critical threshold, the cell can no longer divide. It becomes what biologists call senescent, alive but non-functional, releasing inflammatory signals that accelerate aging in surrounding tissue. Telomere length is now considered one of the most reliable biological markers of aging. Not chronological age, how many years you've been alive, but biological age, how old your cells actually are. And telomere shortening is dramatically accelerated by a specific biochemical environment: elevated cortisol, chronic inflammation, oxidative stress, and suppressed melatonin. Look at that list again. Elevated cortisol. From disrupted hippocampal regulation due to chronic sleep fragmentation, chronic inflammation, from reduced immune function due to suppressed parasympathetic activity during sleep, oxidative stress, from the metabolic byproducts that accumulate when glymphatic clearance is incomplete, suppressed melatonin, from the blue light environment of a television screen hitting your retinal ganglion cells as you sleep. Every single one of these mechanisms produced by the television feeds directly into accelerated telomere shortening. What most people miss is this: telomere damage is not reversible on a meaningful timescale. You can improve your lifestyle, you can slow the rate of future shortening, but the biological aging that occurred during years of disrupted sleep does not undo itself. The body keeps the score at the chromosomal level. And scientists at the University of California, San Francisco, found that individuals with the worst sleep quality had telomeres equivalent to those of someone 10 years older, not slightly older, 10 years. The story becomes stranger, because melatonin is not simply a sleep hormone. Melatonin is one of the most powerful antioxidants your body produces. It crosses every biological barrier, the blood-brain barrier, the mitochondrial membrane, and directly neutralizes reactive oxygen species, the unstable molecules that damage DNA, accelerate cellular aging, and have been implicated in cancer development. Your pineal gland produces melatonin almost exclusively at night, in darkness, which means every night you sleep with the TV on, you are not simply sleeping poorly. You are reducing your body's nightly antioxidant defense. You are allowing oxidative damage to accumulate in your neurons, your cardiovascular tissue, your mitochondrial DNA at a rate slightly higher than it would have been in darkness, slightly higher, every night. Compounding. For years. Let's bring this together, because what we've uncovered is not a story about television. Television is incidental. What we've uncovered is a story about the extraordinary sensitivity of the human biological system and what happens when something as seemingly insignificant as background light interrupts a machinery that evolution spent hundreds of thousands of years perfecting. Follow the chain from beginning to end. A television screen emits blue wavelength light. That light activates intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells in your eye, cells that are not part of your visual system, cells you cannot consciously detect, cells whose only function is to broadcast light intensity to your suprachiasmatic nucleus. Your SCN, receiving that signal, suppresses melatonin production in the pineal gland. Without melatonin, the timing cascade that initiates deep sleep is delayed and disrupted. Without deep sleep, your glymphatic system, the brain's waste clearance network, operates at a fraction of its capacity. Amyloid beta accumulates. Tau proteins are not cleared. The same proteins that form the plaques of Alzheimer's disease build quietly in your synaptic spaces. Without sustained slow-wave sleep, sleep spindles are shortened and interrupted. Memory consolidation is impaired. The hippocampus, deprived of BDNF, begins to lose volume over years, not catastrophically, but measurably. As hippocampal volume decreases, its regulatory control over the HPA axis weakens, cortisol rises, inflammation rises. The immune system, already compromised by disrupted parasympathetic sleep states, becomes chronically dysregulated. That inflammatory environment, elevated cortisol, reduced antioxidant defense, incomplete cellular repair, accelerates telomere shortening. Your cells age faster than your calendar says they should. And throughout all of this, the autonomic nervous system never fully enters the parasympathetic state that genuine, restorative sleep requires, because the thalamic gating system is partially occupied by the human voices and shifting light of a television, keeping the amygdala partially online, keeping the sympathetic system partially engaged, keeping the body in a state that looks like sleep from the outside and functions like something else entirely from within. All of this, from a television in the corner of the room, not loud, not dramatic, just on. And here is the final piece, the one that reframes everything. Your brain does not experience a television as entertainment during sleep. It doesn't experience it as comfort. Those are waking interpretations made by your conscious mind when you make the decision to fall asleep with the set on. Your sleeping brain experiences a television as an anomaly in the environment, a signal that does not match the conditions under which Homo sapiens evolved to sleep, in darkness, in silence, in a world where the only sounds were wind, animals, fire, and the only light was stars. Your nervous system has no category for television. it has no mechanism to downgrade the signal. It cannot learn, after years of exposure, to ignore it in the way that urban dwellers learn to sleep through traffic. The IPRGCs keep firing, the SCN keeps interpreting, the pineal gland keeps suppressing. And the machinery, the extraordinary, ancient, irreplaceable machinery of human sleep, keeps running at a fraction of its designed capacity. This is not an argument for fear. It is an argument for precision. Your brain is not suffering dramatically in the night. It is performing admirably under conditions that are simply not what it was built for. Trimming here, compensating there, doing what biological systems do when their environment shifts, adapting, at a cost. The cost is paid in cortisol, in hippocampal volume, in telomere length, in amyloid beta clearance, in melatonin. In the 10 minutes of real sleep that never happened because a scene changed and your retinal ganglion cells fired and your suprachiasmatic nucleus received a signal and began, again, to calculate what time it was. You thought you were sleeping. You were negotiating with a screen. And your brain, brilliant, ancient, endlessly adaptive, was doing everything it could to give you rest inside an environment that, at the cellular level, was still insisting it was daytime. Close your eyes again. Notice the silence. Notice how quickly something in your body, some old, wordless part of you, begins to relax. That is 300,000 years of biology recognizing the one condition it was built for: darkness. Give it that, every night. Because the processes that begin in darkness, the clearance, the consolidation, the repair, the restoration, are not background functions. They are the reason you can think tomorrow, the reason your memories will hold, the reason your cells will divide correctly, your immune system will survey accurately, your brain will generate the ideas and connections and emotional regulation that define what it means to function as a human being. Sleep is not rest. Sleep is maintenance. And a television is a very quiet, very persistent, very effective way of telling your body's most essential system, not yet. You thought you were sleeping. You were negotiating with a screen. And your brain, brilliant, ancient, endlessly adaptive, was doing everything it could to give you rest inside an environment that, at the cellular level, was still insisting it was daytime.